Hello, it's Kristen here again with a little video. And in this video, I've got a short, simple exercise routine for you. It's something that I made with those of you in mind who might have some complication in the neck shoulder area. Maybe you recovered recently from an injury in that area and you're sort of ready to tentatively start using your arms again and doing some strengthening in that area. Or maybe you have more sort of chronic, complicated issues that you need to consider when starting to do more stuff with the head, neck, shoulder, arm territory. So I hope that this routine might help you gently start exploring some strengthening, some weight bearing through the arms we will use. But of course, having said that, you know, we're all very different, and especially if you're dealing with something, a pathology or a chronic issue, sometimes it really takes something more individual to figure out what exactly gives you the way into your gaining your function back. So even though these movements may work really well for a lot of people, if they don't work for you, if it's too painful, if it's painful in any way, or doesn't feel good for you, then really trust your instincts. Do check with someone, with a professional, whether you should be doing this in the first place. And or reach out to me, and don't be disheartened if it doesn't work for you. It doesn't mean there's anything more wrong with you than with any of the rest of us. It's really more that that maybe this particular approach or these exercises don't work for your issue, because they can't work for everyone. So there's that. So yes, so we're going to get started. One issue I have with this video, of course, is that what I want to look at with you, or what I would like you to explore, if you're willing, is a little bit sort of where my head is, and letting my body underneath support my head a lot more, so that my neck can have it a bit easier, right? Especially if there's a bit of an issue there, that we can start doing more things, doing exercises, really staying as safe and supportive of this area as possible. And that can be an issue when we're doing exercises to a video, or when we have someone demonstrating them, because what do we all do when we're in a class or watching a video? The head's doing one thing while the body is doing the rest. So that doesn't really work in this case. So I will try to minimize that problem by demonstrating the movement for a little bit and then stopping, so that you're less tempted maybe to look at the video. And I'll let you know when I start the next exercise, so you can then look back. And then, of course, if you've done it a couple of times, if it does work for you and you want to do it a few more times, then there will be a point where you don't have to look at all, and that would be really the best way to do these exercises. So I'll start seated, and I'm sitting back on my heels. You don't have to sit in that way. You could sit cross-legged, or you could even sit on a chair for this seated bit. You should really decide how you're going to sit based on how easy and comfortable it feels to sit with your head over your pelvis, because that's the whole point of this. So if you're, let's say, sitting cross-legged, you're back here, and that's the best it's going to be, that's not going to work, because we're not going to do any great movements here struggling in that position. So you could sit cross-legged, or in any other way up on something. That often helps. I'm going to choose to sit back on my heels. If you're comfortable with that, you can do that too, because it takes us then into the next bit quite easily. So take a moment just sitting back on your heels, or sitting on whatever you're sitting on, so you can feel your sitting bones, your pelvis being this sort of big bowl, stable base supported by the floor, and your head at the other end of the spine being balanced on top. And in a way, we're actually going to just trust the spine that it will find its balance. It's flexible, every spine's different, so we don't need to police it right now. We're going to just go with the opposite ends. So one has the tail in sort of reaching down, in the back, going all the way down almost towards that base, that ground support together with the sitting bones. And then we've got the spine sort of slinking up all the way into the head. So you could sort of poke yourself just in front of your ears and get a sense that, well, my spine nearly goes up there. You can even leave your hands there if that's helpful for you with some of the movements we're going to do. Of course, if it's hurting your shoulders or you prefer to not to, that's just fine as well. It's just like, might be a bit helpful sometimes to get that tactile orientation. But yeah, you're just going to take a moment here to really just explore how your pelvis, how the ground and your pelvis are supporting your head so that your neck doesn't really have to do it. You know, your neck is a very mobile, easily worn out area, stressed area. And if you're having issues there, wouldn't it be nice if that whole area could let some responsibility go to the structures below? There's a lot of body left and the ground to help the neck navigate the head. So I'm just starting with a little bit of shifting side to side, but actually what I'm also doing is a little side bending. So I'm thinking of one shoulder dropping, one shoulder coming up, the side opening up. You can do it with me. This is really what I'm going to be doing for a while now, or this is the movement. So if you want to just go ahead, close your eyes or turn the screen away for a bit, just play with this movement and really, you know, it's like just letting your head come along with the spine. Again, maybe you have your hands in front of your ears, just below those cheekbones on the sides, and getting the sense that how your spine is really carrying the head. The head's just resting on top like a coat on a coat hanger, one of those freestanding coat hangers. You see what I mean? Your weight shifts, of course, as well. So you will drop more into one sitting bone, into one hip. And the ground will hold that, so you can gently push off that to take yourself the other direction. You can also, depending on how you're sitting, you can have your arms down, sort of by your side, so that one hand is actually sort of meeting the floor or the sofa or whatever you're sitting on. And you can play a little bit with also using your hand to push off. So later on in this video, we might do some weight bearing, or we will probably start strengthening the shoulder girdle and the arms. So this could be a nice first test. And of course, if you're not ready yet to progress to weight bearing, which we will do later, then maybe you're just going to do the seating bit and leave the second half of the video for another time when you're ready. So just continue with that a moment longer, just on your own. I'm not going to do it anymore, so you can really close your eyes and breathe and just explore this movement. Make sure you're not making it too big. It doesn't have to be sort of the biggest movement you can possibly do. It's smaller in a way is better, because it's about balance here as well and ease. And then you might pause and just have a brief look at the next piece. So this is then again a spinal movement, but this time in another direction. So it's like C-shaping, curling forward, and then extending upwards. So again, you're thinking of the two ends, the tail and the bottom of the pelvis, and the spines moving up into pretty much your head, and the two lengthening away from one another to slightly curl forward, and then extending down and back. So the tail drops down with the sitting bones and reaches back, and it sort of extends the head, the breastbone, and the head up and back a little. And again, you could do this with your eyes closed. That might be really useful. You're keeping the sense that your spine is reaching in opposite directions, in the upwards direction, the downwards direction, during the whole movement sequence. So even when you're C-shaping, it's not a kind of collapse. There's still length, there's still life and expansion. and your head is still being carried by the rest of the spine. So of course your head can go further, you can get a lovely neck stretch, and of course your head can go further back and you can look at the ceiling and feel like you're doing a more satisfying movement. But again, what if your head and your neck just didn't have to do it? There's still plenty you're going just with this experience of what if the body is actually helping out and the head, the neck doesn't have to do anything much. Just keeping soft and balancing the head. So again, I'm not going to do it for a moment, so you can just continue for a moment with yourself. Just really tuning into your body and this sense of maybe a little bit of space between all your vertebrae as the spine moves, and the spine moving up into your head. And because of the spine shaping in a certain way, your head gets carried into these different directions. Same with the pelvis almost. Or not almost, really. So we're coming to the third last bit in sitting. And depending on how you're sitting, this will feel a little different. So again, I'm staying on my heels, but yeah, whichever position you're sitting in will probably have a bit of an impact of how this feels. And again, I'm just going to make sure my pelvis is holding my head up. I'm going to leave the spine to doing it how it's doing it. I'm going to have that sense of gently reaching down with my sitting bones and tail and up with the head. And then I'm going to let my body turn my head to look over my shoulder. So I may even do this a little bit from my sitting bones. Just go with instinct. You know how to do this, really. Your body knows it. You're meeting the supporting ground to rotate and to look a little over your shoulder. And you're not, again, really, it's not about being actually able to look back over your shoulder. The head can always go a lot further, or usually a lot further than the rest of the spine. But this really is about how does it feel if my body is doing it? And how much can I actually orient without having to move my neck all that much? It's not that we're trying to keep our head still and our neck still and, never again move the head from the neck. But it's really about emphasizing how much movement can come from the support of the body underneath. And of course, if you want to move your head a little further then to see a little bit more about what's over there, that's fine. But you're really going with not jarring, not tensing, not twisting the neck to a place where it starts feeling compressed somewhere or gets even painful. So again, do it on your own. This is really all it is. It's a turn, a slight look over your shoulder. I'm not going to do it anymore. But you can do it with your eyes closed. And see how that is really letting your eyes come back into your head. Sometimes that helps reorienting where your head is, in case it moved a little forward because you were looking forward. And then in this case, it may also be quite nice to have your eyes open. Really allow your eyes to orient with the help of your body, because your body is rotating your eyes to, your side or back over your shoulder. And that can be incredibly calming, actually, because, for all we know, there are little goblins creeping up on us from behind. We wouldn't know unless we look, right? So when you allow your eyes, when you allow your body to orient like that, it's just calms the nervous system down because it knows what's around you. Really simple. So we're going to move on to the next bit, and we're going to move into a little bit of weight bearing. So again, you may just want to watch first, so you're not doing what I'm doing, which is turning my head to one side while my body is doing another thing. So I start in what they call that child pose. So from sitting on my heels, I really just leaned forward a bit and put my hands on the ground with my arms stretched out. My weight is still in my legs and my lower body, so that really there is not that much weight bearing going on just yet. But I might then just sort of shift a little forward and a little down again, just testing it out, maybe moving my arms a bit further forward, shifting forward over my hands and coming back again. And, you can play with this. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. Your arms a bit further forward will make it a little bit better when you're coming over your hands, so that you're roughly with your knees under your hips and hands under your shoulders. But it depends on what's going on with your shoulders, because if this movement is actually really challenging for, let's say, a shoulder impingement or something like that, you may want to start a little closer to you. So there's very little point watching me doing it, because you might have to find your own sort of adapted version of this. The essence really is that you start with little or no weight on your hands, really coming from the lower body, and then sending your body a little forward to bring a little weight onto the hands. There's a lot that we could say about the shoulder organization, but that sort of takes it a little too far in this video. All I would say is, keep a lot of space between the floor and your chest. So your arms are really space keepers. And as you're shifting forward and backwards, you might take a moment just focusing on that. How is it to bring some weight over the shoulders? You can also do a little sort of walking action forward. That's a bit more functional if you want to. So you're kind of walking your hands back, can be really nice. You can take a moment to pause and just, as you're sitting back, shift a little side to side, because it's kind of nice on the shoulders, really. You have a little bit of maybe already pushing into the floor, and then using your hands to push from one side to the other a little bit. So it's kind of priming this idea of keeping space, weight bearing, moving. And all of this that I'm just showing you can play with for a moment, but then also you want to bring your awareness back to this spine alignment, the neck. So very easy, as we said, to turn the head to look at what the video is doing, or to have your heads oriented forwards, or to forget you have a head and just drop it off. But what if you remember again how far the spine goes into your head, and the tail going in the other direction, and then sending the top piece of your spine forward. It's not the eyes, it's like the roof of your head. So you're just playing with that. There are many cues in Pilates or yoga that speak to this head alignment in terms of keeping length in the back of the neck and all of that. But really, I would just say, let your spine send itself in the head forward. And close your eyes if you like. If that makes you a little dizzy, keep your eyes open. But you'll probably just track your eyes somewhere along the floor. So I'm going to stop doing it, and you can, again, play with this for a moment where you're sitting back in child pose. You might shift a little side to side, walk your hands forward, walk your hands back, or keep your hands in one place and just shift your weight forward, shift it back. And as you can see, there are many different focuses that you can entertain yourself with in this really simple movement. Of course, you can take breaks. You can always sit back again in child pose, or even return to sitting. So continue for a moment. Check you keep just breathing easily. And usually when we hold our breath, or the breath is doing something tense, it will affect the rest of the structures. So go at it easily. Don't have too much expectations of how this should go. Just explore and see what happens, and attend to and respond to what your body is saying. You really can enable yourself to be the expert on your body. So we're going to continue to the next piece, which is really when we're forward with the hands under the shoulders and the knees under the hips. We could go into what they call a cat stretch, C-shaping again, flexing the spine forward, and then extending, reversing that with the tail and the head coming up and the middle dropping down. And again, this is mainly the opportunity to explore where your head is, and that your head is exactly like it was in sitting. Your head isn't going further than the rest of the spine can go or gets forgotten. It's not about, in this case, getting a really nice big stretch somewhere. This is an exploration of moving the spine in an even way. And you've seen it, you know what it is. I'm going to not do it anymore and let you leave you to it for a moment to explore that on your own. Again, eyes closed or just keeping looking ahead. And letting your spine move your head, letting your spine carry your head. And of course, the tail at the other end is mirroring what the head is doing. And the head is mirroring what the tail is doing. And of course, as you're doing this over your hands, weight bearing on them. So when you need to take a rest, you just shift yourself back again. You could move between this and the previous exercises. This can really be a nice little organic flow. And we're moving on to the next piece. So the last two exercises are perhaps taking it one step further. So you could kind of look at this routine as three steps to develop, or three intensity levels, the seated one being the simplest. And so you could just stick to that for a bit. Then you could move on to these that we've just done, starting with a little bit of weight bearing and moving the spine and weight bearing. And then the third one now is requiring a little bit more weight bearing on the hands, taking it a little further, basically. So you can really check where are you at and how much of these last ones do you feel up for, if you're there yet, or maybe you need to leave it for later. So again, we're starting sitting back. In this case, though, we're tucking the toes under, and all the weight, as much as possible, is back on the legs, or even in the hips and feet. So the knees could almost come off. Your hands are stretched out, your weight bearing into the heel of the hands. Your arms are long, keeping the space, keeping your chest, your breastbone away from the floor. You might have to experiment with exactly where your arms are, how far they're forward or how close they are to your knees. You need a little bit of space there between them, and you'll feel, once you know what you're doing, you feel where they need to be. And then keeping your spine long, so the tail lengthens back, the head, the spine is lengthening the head, keeping the head, in a comfortable place. You're probably looking down somewhere at your hands. Then you could imagine your heels getting pulled back to the floor behind you and your knees opening up. And because you're keeping your spine long, your hips are floating up to the ceiling. And I keep my eyes right now on the floor, which actually is not that ideal for the purpose of this exercise. There are other reasons where that's quite good. So as you're doing this, really get a sense of your spine moving your head again. So where does your head go and where do your eyes go? And depending on, you may be able to straighten your knees, you may be having to keep them bent. In most cases, they will probably be bent. That's fine, because really it's more about the spine staying long. If I straighten my legs, I might suddenly do this, which isn't really that helpful right now. So try shifting expectations a little bit if you're having an expectation of what this should look like. And then you slowly come back again. Now, as your hips are coming up and your head turns in a way, or your eyes are traveling back, you are ending up with your head between your arms and your arms over your head, which can be a challenging position if you're having shoulder issues. So that is one to look out for. But also it may just be, how far am I going? Maybe I'm just starting to play with this. You can also shift forward. So then it looks a little different. And by shifting yourself forward, your orientation between your shoulders and your head is different. It's literally changing it from having your arms up to the ceiling to a little further down if you were in a different orientation to gravity, if that makes sense. So again, doesn't have to look any particular way. You're working with what works for you, for your shoulders, for your neck, for your spine. Again, I'm not going to do it. Have a go at trying this a few times if you like. And it's like kind of like a sensation like someone's pulling your hips up and back, and you're still just keeping the floor away from you. You can do it with your eyes closed. Again, that might be very helpful because we're very tempted to keep our eyes where they were, which means our head is coming out of alignment. And again, if you need to take a rest, you can obviously mobilize the wrists, the shoulders, go back to any of the simpler exercises. And this is potentially moving into really stronger upper weight bearing territory. And of course, it challenges other areas as well. And then I have one last piece for you. So if you're wanting to have a look at this last one, you're starting again in the same place, but not with your toes tucked under this time, back in the child pose. Really nice to give yourself the time to maybe just mobilize a little bit, letting your forearms rest down, again, shifting a little side to side. So your shoulders get sort of easily mobilized if they've gotten a bit tense, or if if you need to rest a little. And then you come forward again, like you did before, onto hands and knees with your hands under the shoulders. And then you just reach one leg back and tuck your toes under. And then you add the second one, almost like you just want to really stretch out your calves, pushing your weight back into your legs, into your heels. And then the first knee comes down, and then the second knee comes down, and you're just shifting back again. So you're basically visiting briefly a push-up position. And then after a break, you move back into it again, and avoid the temptation to sort of stay there, grit your teeth, and endure. Because you really just want to familiarize yourself with it and give your body the idea that it's possible and it's not a big deal. And it may or may not be a big deal, but this would be if it feels okay to do, this is a really nice start where you can visit that position brief enough that you're not tensing up and going into this big stress response. Be playful with it, mix it in with the rest of the other movements, if you like. So again, have a moment playing with that while I'm not doing anything, to give you the chance to close your eyes, to keep your head again with the rest in line, carried by the spine. And then you can sit back, and I would strongly recommend that you take a moment to maybe just do some shoulder slides or shoulder rolls, and sitting, whatever you might feel, even doing some head rolls or some gentle stretches on the neck, whatever you are familiar with that eases and mobilizes this area, or soothe, can't say that word, soothing. So it's soothing to the area that has done some work, whatever that might be for you. So something simple, just to let that kind of disperse and nourish what has just done some work. And I hope you found it helpful or insightful or had some interesting experiences. Do feel free to let me know, of course, and I'll see you around, and good luck.